Welcome back to another live podcast. I am your host, Emily Bose, and I'm very excited to be joined today by Michael Mullins. Michael is the Director of Defense Industry Initiatives at NC State. And I know also a veteran. Michael, I'm very excited to have you on the show today. We have a lot to talk about, and I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Awesome. Emily, thank you so much for the invitation, and look forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Well, let's dive right in because I know, as I mentioned, you're working in North Carolina with NC State, and you're working from, conversations we had before. My understanding is you're heavily focused on manufacturing initiatives within the state, and specifically North Carolina has a long and storied history that I'm sure you could tell us a little more about in the textile industry that I think a lot of people probably don't know very much about. And specifically within that, textiles that are tied into the defense industrial base and things related to our national security and our military. For folks that are outside of that space, I think they wouldn't necessarily put all of that together. You don't always think about textiles and military. So, what opened your eyes to how critical textiles are in this defense space? And what role is that workforce development work that you're doing playing in supporting the mission that textiles have in relation to national security?
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me start by saying that I've been at NC State for about 9 years. And prior to that, I was in the defense industry. And prior to that, I retired from the military. And so textiles is not my background. But I've gotten a great education about textiles in North Carolina over the past 4 years. And it really is the center of gravity. And of course, that's my opinion for the textile industry for the United States. There's a long history of textiles in North Carolina. And like all the textile industry and many manufacturers and other industries, of course, over the last couple of decades have gone through very, very turbulent times. And but here at NC State for the last 9 years, I managed a series of Department of Defense programs, initially focused on industry resilience, helping small manufacturers really diversify their business portfolios. And it sounds a little counterintuitive, but to do more commercial work rather than defense industry work. All the concept that all your eggs in one basket's not a good idea. And after Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of companies in North Carolina and nationally went out of business. And the DoD realizes and understands that's one of the major reasons for it. So we're trying to get those companies to do more commercial work. But then about 4 years ago, we became aware of a program called the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, also managed by the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation, or old CC. They've changed their acronym the last couple of years. And we had to focus our efforts on a strategic priority of the Department of Defense. And so we took a look at North Carolina, and we considered several industry sectors. Aerospace comes to mind, but we finally came down on textiles. A lot of people would say textiles, kind of thing of the past, and it's an older industry, but still it's a major part of North Carolina's economy. But the real important thing is that the advanced textiles and the smart fabrics focus, especially the Department of Defense has for their warfighters, a variety of applications of protection of warfighters to medical applications, camouflage. It's amazing the research that's going on in textiles. So that's where we have focused our efforts in North Carolina. And over the past 4 years, we've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, innovators, people with just a good idea, and worked with them to help get to the point of being able to commercialize those products in support of the Department of Defense. And a lot of those applications have been medical, come to mind. I mean, even embedding medication into yarn and wearing things on your knee instead of taking a pill, the medication can be right through the skin on your knee. And there's a variety of other things, a lot of sleeping disorder applications and things of that sort. Also monitoring the health of soldiers while they're working, while they're in combat, be able to know blood pressure and reading heart monitors and embedding microelectronics into textiles, things of all that sort. So I could go on and talk about that. But from a workforce perspective, it's been an enormous challenge because the textile industry, much like all manufacturing, has this difficulty attracting skilled workers. But one, we don't have the skilled workers to attract. And two, there continues to be, I think, a pretty pervasive image challenge for manufacturing in general, and specifically, I think textiles really has a hurdle to get over.
Mm.
You don't have a lot of schools and parents probably encouraging young people to go into the textile industry when they leave high school. So that's why it's so important to have these K through 12 programs that we're affiliated with through our partnerships within our ecosystem, and making them aware of these opportunities. And if they're aware, and even more importantly, if they can physically get into some of these companies, they can find out that it's not that image. They're clean rooms, and everyone's walking around with these white lab coats on and things of that sort. And now they can all of a sudden start picturing themselves potentially in these roles. So we need to do a better job. These jobs are typically coming out of rural communities, more urban environments. Teachers, counselors are probably not pushing students into this career field, whereas in the rural communities, it's more common. So there's just less opportunities.
Okay.
Well,
so many interesting things that you mentioned there, and sort of rabbit trails we could run down. I think one thing you mentioned that really caught my attention was this idea that from what I gathered from what you said, you're not only helping the established textile businesses diversify their portfolios so they can serve both public and private sectors, which makes a lot of sense and feels like a bit of a rising tide lifts all ships and mentality. And also, if a company, government contracts come and go. We've seen that with a lot of the Doge cuts and other things that have happened, in the government in the last year. And that leaves, I'm sure, a lot of these companies with uncertainty. And so if they have the stability of consistent commercial contracts, then they can also be there when the government does need them for defense, when those critical needs arise. So I think that sounds like a very needed and significant initiative to help them with that. But then also you mentioned, helping some innovators and maybe some startups get going. Can you tell me, a story about, or an example about one of those kind of exciting new initiatives that you've been able to see start to come to fruition?
Yeah, just the one I sort of mentioned just a moment ago was it's a company called, and I'm sure Rob Cooley, who's the CEO, and he's a retired brigadier general. He's a real entrepreneur. He's got several other ongoing businesses as well, but he's been involved with neuroscience and working with sleep disorders because of his own experience. And a lot of veterans come out of the military with having these sleep disorders and PTSD, et cetera. So, if anybody's listening here and more interested, Google Neureme, and you can really dig into the data and the details about it. But it's remarkable. And matter of fact, they were one of our first companies to come into our program. And we typically run these companies through. We have a science and innovation incubator called First Flight Venture Center. It's a partner of ours as part of our ecosystem, and they're located in Research Triangle Park here in Raleigh-Durham area. And then we run them through this program. It's a pre-accelerator program to help them work towards commercialization. And it's just a fantastic program. And they have a lot of more senior business mentors that are a part of the process as well to help them along. And if you look into Neureme, matter of fact, I saw they just received a national award I think it was this past week. And I saw Rob Cooley, the CEO, at Wall Street on the floor last week as well on LinkedIn. So
that's awesome.
Far in the last several years. And there are several other small businesses and individuals. We've got professors at NC State we've worked with, to students at NC State. I should mention that NC State has the only College of Textiles in the United States. And if you go back a number of years, you would probably encounter a few other schools. I think Clemson comes to mind. And these are typically land grant institutions like NC State, but we're the only College of Textiles. And as a result of that, a lot of the very prominent research that's going on in the United States in textiles, and specifically for support the Department of Defense and other federal agencies, are taking place at Wilson and a number of the research institutes they have within Wilson, depending upon where they're going. There's the Non-Woven Institute, and there's other elements that really focus more on protective clothing, like for firemen and that sort of thing. We have a man called Pyroman if you put Pyroman in as well, you'll see him on fire at NC State and the Wilson College of Textiles when they're testing materials. But yeah, there's several other examples. I think if you go to our website, we have a list of the companies that we've worked with, and some great success stories to brag about.
That's awesome, and hopefully we'll share some of the links to some of those things in the comments. So if folks watching later want to check them out, they definitely can. One other thing that you mentioned that I think is worth highlighting, I mean, was all fantastic, but that I would like to highlight is the idea of the need to rebrand the industry. And I think this is personally, I think this is a huge issue in the skilled trades that we desperately need to be addressing on a national level across industries. Because I definitely came up in the, denigration of the trades or even non-college routes as, kind of the norm. And I think it did a real disservice to my generation. And I really would love to see it change going forward. So, because there are a lot of incredible jobs, incredible career opportunities in these spaces. And what's interesting to me, and you kind of touched on it, and I think it's something that needs to be highlighted more, and I'd love for you to share a little bit more about it, is the idea that while there certainly are some, old dusty factories you might run into around the country, a lot of manufacturing is extremely high tech or is moving very high tech very quickly. And, if you're coming in to work in manufacturing, you could be in a highly technical job. Like if you're putting electrodes into fabric, that is a tech job, like that's a technical job where you're having to understand how sensors work and electrical wiring works and other things. You're not, like shuttling a loom most likely, or that might not be the only thing that you're doing. There's probably a machine doing that and you're doing something more technical, so I just think I'd love for you to be able to just highlight a little bit more of like, maybe as you've come into this industry as someone who didn't have a background here, what has surprised you? What have you found to be, exciting about the future of what it actually looks like to work in this field? Because I think more people need to hear and understand what that looks like.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I could probably talk about it for an entire length of this discussion. It's just, and it's kind of hard to know where to begin. I think that even at a national level, there are organizations like the Manufacturing Institute, the National Association of Manufacturers. That has anybody ever seen a commercial on television that even addresses it? I mean, not some type, commercial that addresses this and talks about it and shows these career fields and I think the very positive light they should be displayed to people just to kind of begin to alleviate that and knock down that image that exists. And you got to start early. You really do. And the K through 12, as I mentioned before, is really important. I work with a company called the Emerging Technology Institute in Red Springs, North Carolina. I think they did STEM events for about 20,000 kids last year in North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and robotics and drones and just so. And you got to get out. And I think it's very important that industry and these business associations, for example, textile associations, really get more aggressive. Listen, there's enormous competition for these individuals, for these employees. So if you're not going to be more aggressive, if you're not going to go out there and address this issue, then you're going to continue to have this problem. And I'll go and point out a company, one of the companies I've worked with, several that are in the defense space. There's a company called Roush Yates. It's a little north of Charlotte. Roush Yates, everybody in North Carolina knows Roush Yates because this is NASCAR country, and Roush Yates manufactures Ford engines for NASCAR racing.
Okay.
And they were pretty, I think they were looking forward, like a number of NASCAR companies have been over the last several years in North Carolina, and started, because there's been some challenges in the NASCAR industry, and they've decided to diversify their portfolio and go into the defense and aerospace industry as well. And these companies, at least coming from that NASCAR culture, mentality, et cetera, have done quite well. I mean, it's obviously a challenge initially to get your feet settled in and understand how to effectively operate in this new environment. But they, along with other NASCAR companies I've worked with, most of them have found it to be very profitable to do it. And also the culture from NASCAR seems to transfer quite well to that more defense culture. If I took you to Roush H Manufacturing Solutions, and going back to the image piece is why I mentioned them, you probably wouldn't find a hospital as clean as Roush H Manufacturing Solutions. It is unbelievable. So that is where you need to be showing young people the kind of jobs they can have. They don't have any recruiting or retention problem at Roush H because of who they do, what they do, and how they do it, and just the culture they maintain. And I could talk to other companies in North Carolina that are like Core Technology Molding in Greensboro, or Carver Machine Works in Washington, and these other companies that understand how critical, how important culture is in these companies and what it means to recruiting and retaining people, and bringing in young people into your company and the community, and you're kind of getting them already interested in potentially working for you when they're in elementary school, and they may want to do that. So, but you've got to get out there. You can't. It's not going to happen by itself, and I think it's just vital that these companies engage with, for example, related to veterans, is getting these organizations that exist like Heroes Make America down at Fort Bragg, bring these active duty folks to your company, get them on a bus, take them out to tours, these manufacturers. I've attended these events before, and these soldiers and these veterans have the opportunity to actually, maybe for the first time in their life, step into a manufacturing company, and they're being told that they're wanted and that they could do this, and they can now see that there's that they can do this. So that is vital. This stuff doesn't happen from a distance. If you want to compete against everybody else is trying to attract those individuals, you're going to have to be more aggressive. You're going to have to address the image issue and really paint it more like reality is. Like you said, there are places that are more kind of that traditional feel and view, but in most cases, that's not what manufacturing is today at all.
And definitely not where it's going. I think that makes a tremendous amount of sense. And I have talked to multiple people on the show about, the need to get in front of students early, just like what you were saying, to help them see themselves in the environment is critical. And, letting them be hands-on a little bit, get their hands a little dirty and see that they can do it, especially when you're talking about women or other non-traditional groups, minorities, and veterans that are not always presented with these opportunities as this is a place where you can fit, where you can thrive, where you're wanted. Those conversations are critical and can just make all the difference in the world for the future of where all of this is going. And I'm interested to hear, kind of building on that, one additional thing I wanted to say about that, yes, to getting it in front of elementary and high school students and middle school students, but also their parents, because the parents and the teachers and the guidance counselors are the ones who are pushing college. And so, parents need to also understand that these are viable jobs, and not just jobs, careers, and that, there's going to be great salaries, growth potential. Just because you go in and work on a line out of high school doesn't mean that's what you're going to be doing forever. There's a lot of opportunity to grow and develop. So we got to continue to talk about that and get it in front of the full spectrum of people that are kind of driving the culture around this. But I'd love to hear. So I've talked to folks from a number of different industries, even recently, and one common theme, besides we got to get it in front of the kids, is we're facing a generational turnover, especially if you look at things related to, defense industrial base. My husband and I were watching a little documentary on YouTube the other day, and they were saying that during World War II, we were cranking out an entire ship every 4 days and an entire airplane every 14 hours, from nothing to flying in 14 hours. Granted, different type of manufacturing, different levels of technology, and that's all the whole country was doing at the time. So, but those people were not using robots. Like, they were doing all that by hand, and that is just astonishing. And we can't do anything like that right now. Like, we're actually in, I think, dangerous territory with our ability to manufacture for our own defense. So, what are you guys looking at as far as strategies for addressing this generational turnover? Because it's not only the loss of skilled workers, it's also the loss of the institutional knowledge that can go such a long way in, even just basic efficiency in the job. Um, can you share any examples of just how critical that risk is for losing kind of that institutional knowledge, but also any strategies you guys are exploring or implementing that you've seen be successful to try to preserve some of that knowledge as these folks are getting ready to move into retirement?
Yeah, and it's a problem affecting industries everywhere. Just we'll stick with textiles. Just imagine an individual who's been in that industry, or maybe even the same company for 40 years, and just the institutional knowledge that he has or she has when they walk out the door that you just can't replace. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But there are some things I think you can do to alleviate it to some extent. And for example, ensuring this may be a little costly for the company, but it might be more costly not to do it, as these kind of transition and training programs, bringing leaving them in there with an overlap for 30 or 60 days, and really getting to be the sponge with Fred as he's about to depart the company, and that sort of thing. I think that a lot of these smaller businesses could probably improve their SOPs. We see that being a problem. Big problem. A lot of these small businesses don't have SOPs at all. It's just the way they've always done it.
Right. It's all in Johnny's head, and Johnny retires, and all
right.
of a sudden, no one knows how to run the business.
So you gotta, in this day and age, it's not hard to develop SOPs. It may be, again, it's something you need to take a look at and devote a little time and resources to, and which could really help, address the problem. Something, a lot of people wouldn't do this, but some small businesses, again, it wouldn't cost anything, even making videos. Fred, again, he knows his responsibilities, his specific duties every day, and he can, make 10 or 20 short videos. It's not a problem. And basically explaining how he operates this machine, how he turns it on, whatever he wants to say. And pretty informal as much as he wants to be, because it's going to be with fellow other employees. So those are some things that just immediately jump to mind. They've got to be simple. They've got to be inexpensive or no cost, pretty much, if you're going to get small businesses that are focused on paying paycheck every 2 weeks. People like money. So I'm a big fan of simplicity, especially with small manufacturers when it comes to solutions. And these are just some things I think that they could consider doing, and we could help them with that as well.
The video idea is great. And the first thing that comes to mind for me with that is get a high schooler in on a summer internship and make it their job to, film every single one of your senior technicians doing their job, and let them do a huge portfolio project. It doesn't have to be fancy, but imagine what that student, you talk about getting it in front of them early, what that student would soak in, and how you could capture that. Because I feel like, I don't want to overly generalize, but my dad is a doctor and not tech savvy at all. And if I were like, Dad, make me videos of everything you do as you do your job, it would stress him out to no end. So, I could imagine that potentially being very stressful for folks who are not as tech savvy to try to think about doing their technical job and film themselves. But if you could just, bring in someone who's super technically comfortable, anyone from Gen Z will do, and let them take those videos, they're going to be able to capture things too that someone may not think of when they're trying to do it themselves, because they're so used to doing it. I think that's the hardest thing when you're really comfortable doing something, is putting yourself back in the shoes of someone who's never done it. You always skip steps because you're just so comfortable with them. But the other thing I was going to say is if you need to write SOPs, I would think hire a veteran, because they know SOPs. I think that's a great transition to, another area that we wanted to talk about, is just what makes veterans particularly well suited to careers in advanced manufacturing, but also specifically in textiles. And, SOP may be one of them, but tell me, about that and any other areas that you think veterans in particular would be well suited for.
Yeah, I was talking to a company this morning and a company yesterday about this, trying to help them. Because a lot of small businesses, again, they want veterans for a number of reasons that I'll mention, but they don't know where to find their veterans. And then I also see on the other end veterans who maybe never had a job in their lives outside of the military. So this is really uncharted territory for them. So you're trying to bring these two together, and that's where it seems to be one of the biggest challenges. But what I hear from companies that are looking for veterans or that really focus on hiring them, kind of the same items over and over again: leadership skills, mission focus. A lot of these manufacturers, they'll do a urinalysis test for 50 applicants, and 35 will come back positive. Military people are drug free. They're planners or organizers or executors. All these things that these soft skills that they so desperately need. And a lot of times I hear from companies that we don't need an individual to have the technical skills. We'll teach them what they need to know. What we desperately need are these soft skills that many veterans bring to companies that they decide to work with. And I think that's it. I'm sure there's a number of other ones I'm missing. The challenge, I think, is there's about 200,000 veterans that leave the service annually in the United States. I think it's somewhere in that ballpark. In North Carolina, it's around 16 to 18,000 a year. We have the fourth largest active duty footprint in the nation, the military, largest base in the nation, Fort Bragg, et cetera. The only people that have more than us, California, Texas, and Virginia.
Virginia.
Yeah,
I know. I'm here in Hampton Roads, so I'm always like,
so
we got most people beat in size, but
you have the largest naval base on the planet. And
it's wild.
But you've got to have a plan, a strategy to acquire these veterans, and you got to educate yourself. They're not going to show up on your doorstep, and they've got a lot of competing interests that are trying to get them. I went to I won't mention the names of these companies, but I went to some large aerospace companies in the Greensboro area a couple of months ago, and I did it with a program, again, Heroes Make America from the Manufacturing Institute. This was exposing those active duty veterans and spouses to the manufacturing jobs potentially. And it was just absolutely fabulous. I really, really enjoyed it. And but what I discovered was all of these aviation companies desperately wanted to hire these veterans. And they all kind of had the same thing to tell them, is that and this is aerospace jobs. They said, we will teach you the skills. We just want all of your leadership and your mission focus, and you come to work on time, and you do all the things that we really need from our employees. We'll teach them skills. And they were, ready to fill out applications right there on the spot. So businesses, I don't think a lot of times people appreciate, especially when you start getting, and I don't mean to differentiate here too much between urban and rural, but when you get in a lot of these communities in rural North Carolina or just rural America, these small manufacturers have a hard time finding employees and retaining employees and not having to deal with, again, some of these issues because in some of these rural communities, the drug issues are enormous. And so they all struggle with this. So if they can find, veterans that want to maybe get off that fast train after 20 or 30 years and maybe come work in, rural North Carolina, then they would love to have them. And just because of all these skills and experiences. And the other thing I think that's really, really important is in most cases, these individuals embrace technology. They have a lot of technical skills that they acquired in the military. I don't care if you're an infantryman, you're a medic, you're an aviation mechanic, wherever you came from, even supply people, and they're legit in supply chain management. These individuals have all been trained on some of the most cutting edge equipment in this country. And when they show up on your doorstep, they're probably going to be working with stuff that's much older than they saw when they came out of the military. So they're young people. They embrace technology. It's just, and I find that young people who lead companies that I even work with, they're embracing technology. And I'll tell you, social media. I talked to a gentleman the other day who's an engineer from NC State, young man with two of his friends, and they're manufacturing these CNC machines that are doing quite well. They're mobile machines. And I think they're about to really do well with the military. And I asked him, how do you market these items? He said, 100% social media. I was like, what? He said, yes. And he said, I can't keep up with the work. So it's just
amazing.
It's a different culture. It's a different mindset that certainly where I came from. And a lot of folks, they're, up in age a little bit. And but it's important if you still want to be relevant, I think in business, that you've got to have people like that understand how to effectively operate and market and recruit and retain and all the things that are necessary to be successful. this is not 1970s. And I'm sorry if you don't change, then you're probably not going to be around. It's
Yeah,
reality.
absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And again, you made some great points there. I think I've heard from so many people, the veterans, I want more veterans because they show up on time. I mean, just that simple having someone with good attendance, is sometimes enough. I think one interesting point to sort of tie the two parts that we were talking about together, with veterans and with that more, senior, experienced, seasoned, that's what I'm looking for, more seasoned, group in the workforce is those are the folks that really have bought into the mission of what your company is doing. The ones who've been there for 30 or 40 years, most likely, by and large, believe in what the company's doing. They've bought into it. They've been there their, whole career, a huge percentage of their career, and they can really demonstrate and communicate that mission-driven focus, the meaningful part of the work, probably as much or better than, someone on the executive level that's like, here's the company values. And so having those people and their perspective on the work available to communicate to veterans, to millennials, to Gen Z, to those generations that are coming in that do actually care about their work being meaningful, having value, contributing to something bigger than themselves. Not saying other generations didn't care about that, but I think that that's like a real driving factor for a lot of young people is they're like, if I'm going to be doing hard work, I want it to like mean something. I think that that's something that's being overlooked a little bit is, hey, we need these folks to be telling the mission because they have lived it, they believe it, they've got it, to these newer, folks that are coming in the door, so that they can really catch that. Just as an interesting sort of thought, side note. What are you seeing, as far as the role of partnerships? I know you've talked about companies, really needing to be out there in the community. Totally agree with that. But what does that synergy look like between industry, the trade schools, universities like yourself, the local communities? How have you seen that sort of, is there a synergy coming together around making these careers more visible and sustainable? Or are there things we could do to improve that?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is what we've established here as a part of our Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, our ecosystem. And before we did this, I certainly had not been exposed to anything like it. And but it's just, for us at least, it's been remarkable. It's taking a lot of different organizations and resources and kind of putting them all together on the same team and aligning our efforts. And there's all this overlaps: workforce, advanced manufacturing, supply chain, they all overlap, and one affects the other. So if you're not kind of working together towards the same goal, it's just not going to be very efficient. And so we, with our textile DoD program, there's a workforce element, a manufacturing, advanced manufacturing element, and what we call our ideation group and our entrepreneurship and commercialization group. And then very vital to the effort is we have an advocacy and outreach group, which is, if you're not critical to all this, I know I keep beating this drum, but if you want to really embrace industry, then you're going to have to get up out of your chair. And you're going to have to go out. You're going to have to walk the plant floor. You're going to have to sit down and talk with CEOs and plant managers and operations managers. And you're going to have to spend a lot of time with them, because you can't solve their problems if you don't understand what their problems are. And when it comes to workforce, when it comes to their regional challenges that you need to understand, it's just not one size fits all. And I think it's critical. And I haven't mentioned this yet, is community colleges. We have 58 community colleges in North Carolina. It's just an incredible community college system. We're so fortunate to have it. And I think that's one of the primary reasons, to plug for North Carolina again, that in the last 4 years, we've been ranked the #1 state to do business 3 times in the nation.
Wow.
So again, this year we were ranked #1. And I think part of it, and there's a variety of reasons for that. We're a very business friendly state. But our community college system, all these companies that are moving in here, we just had an aerospace company decide to build a plant here, and they said they're going to need 20,000 employees. Well, I know that the community college system in North Carolina, one of their top priorities, if not the top priority, is aerospace, jobs and training and preparation to fill those positions. So if you as a company do not have an established relationship with your local community college, wrong answer. You need to get up, go out and talk to them, because one, they have maybe a customized training program that can help direct individuals into your business. You can affect curriculum that they're offering that will also, and all this is going to help you ultimately. So I think that, you've got to come together. A lot of times people want to kind of, operate in this stovepipe world that it just is not productive. And if you're all willing to serve on the same team and toward the same objectives, and don't worry, everybody's going to be fine. Everybody's going to get the credit if that's what they're looking for. But we're going to be far more successful operating as a team and having all these resources as an organization, or an ecosystem, as we call them. And we find it very, very effective. And we're in the process right now. I mentioned earlier before we start talking, Emily, that we've established a North Carolina Maritime Manufacturing Initiative. And if you look at our diagram, you would think it may initially is our textile ecosystem, but it's not. It's our maritime, and there's differences to it. But it's getting organizations who all want to work together, and I think it's so vital that and playing well with each other, and all for the benefit of the companies, which ultimately, it's not just the companies in your state, but the families, the communities, and the impact all these small and medium-sized businesses have on the state. So I would say take a look at possibly establishing an ecosystem, and for your industry, you're trying to address the challenges of. But if those are one of the kind of immediate things I would tell a company, what's the first thing you need to do? Number one, before anything else, is if you don't have a relationship with your local community college, that's your number one priority. Do that.
That's fantastic advice. And I can affirm, having spoken to a lot of different trade schools and community colleges across the country, they are looking for those relationships with their local employers. They value the employers that sit on their advisory boards and give feedback, like you were saying, on their curriculum. They want to be training students to go out and get jobs. And in some states, to get state funding, they have to be able to prove that they can place a certain number of students in jobs, or there's various things like that are required of these schools, especially for these publicly funded schools. So it's really vital for them to have the feedback of the industry. So if you're not in there, you're missing out on an opportunity that's available. And I think if I could throw one note, if there's any manufacturing leaders listening to this, as someone who did quite a bit of recruiting and manufacturing in the past, and has worked pretty extensively with veterans, including something about military service in your job descriptions, or writing job descriptions specifically for the military members you want to get in front of, really goes a long way. Because I saw something the other day, and this could start a whole nother rabbit trail conversation, but I saw an article on LinkedIn where they were saying like over 50% of CEOs think that college degrees are not really required for most jobs, but basically 80% of jobs on LinkedIn still list a college degree requirement. And only, I think it's about 30 to 35% of veterans have degrees, like 4-year degrees. A lot of them have 2-year degrees. And so if you've got a arbitrary degree requirement on your job description that's not really necessary, you are missing out on veterans, and lots of other folks as well. But so that's, like, I think, a very simple way. Would you agree with that, or do you disagree with that? I'd love to hear your feedback just on that point, because I think it's a really simple way that people can open the aperture to get more veterans and other, non-traditional talent.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I would tell anybody, if you see a college degree requirement on that job rec, and you really feel like it's a job you're interested in, that you would be good at, apply for it anyway. And go ahead and put some verbiage. Somebody may take the time to read that and go, you know what, I want to talk to this individual. They really. That's a
great point.
I go over and knock the door down. Let them know that this is what you want. But if I could add this about the veterans, I just wanted to mention this as
Please.
well. Because a lot of times we focus our efforts or our conversations on how to recruit these veterans. And that's kind of what we've been doing today to some extent. But a lot of times I tell companies that's the easy part. The hard part is to retain them, because
Yes,
these individuals
agreed.
have been on a team. They've been ministry focused. They're fired up. What they're doing. Again, they're serving something larger than themselves. Yes, they did get out, but all that's still in them. They want to
Oh
be a
yeah.
part of the team. They want to win. They want to do well. That's what they bring to your company. But if you got them and they don't feel that, you're probably not going to keep them around very long. And I think that the companies that really stand out to veterans, you have an opportunity on your website to talk about how veterans are important to your company and what type of program you have to integrate them into your corporate business, and you have something in place to welcome them with other veterans and kind of help them to make that transition, that sort of thing. And back to your point about job recs, I've always told companies that get familiar with military occupational specialties. I used to do it. I worked at General Dynamics, American Systems, some other companies. I would put military MOSs on the job rec, and whether it's Army or Air Force. Let's just say it's human resources, for example. You can put Army, Air Force, Navy, MOS is there. I'm also communicating to that veteran that I took the time to understand a little bit about MOSs, and I can talk about the military program that we have at our company and how much we value. And if you do those things, you're going to stand out against the other companies that are trying to attract these veterans that aren't doing those things. So make it known. But just remember, if you don't have that culture, and I think that's such an important word for all businesses, that's why employees are going to stay with your companies, is your culture at the end of the day. They're valued, they're respected, they want to be a part of a team, they want to succeed, they want to excel. And if you provide them an environment like that, and you'll do well. But veterans are not going to thrive and retain and stay in your company if that's not the environment they find themselves in. So I would say save the time and resources in recruiting them, and because all you're going to do is waste your time if you're not going to retain them. So
Totally agree with that. That's a excellent point, and we could carry on this conversation all day. Unfortunately, we're at our time. We have to wrap up, but really appreciate your time, Michael.
certainly,
I feel like there were a lot of great points. I tried to take notes on the side of some of the companies and things you mentioned, and I'll try to tag them and, highlight some of those things. If you want to share, any links to any of your, websites, projects, things that you mentioned as well, initiatives,
yeah.
you're welcome to share those in the comments. I think it'd be great for people to be able to access those. And I wanted to shout out, I don't know if Mark Kramer. Mark, thanks
Mark
so much for
Palmer.
tuning in. He
Yeah,
left a couple
I know Mark.
he left a couple comments just
Were
enjoying the
they nice?
conversation. Yeah, he said great point, and the relationship between DoD and industry is a critical pillar of national defense, especially now. So just appreciate anybody that's willing to tune in and watch live and leave comments or ask questions. You're always welcome to do that. And if anyone wants to leave questions in the comments of the show, if you're watching the replay, you're welcome to leave questions, and I'll make sure Michael sees them or we can address them. So again, really, really appreciate your time and just the work that you're doing, the efforts that you're making to help advance these critical industries in our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.